Least favorite type of film.
But okay, like a farce can exist. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so like it is not trying. It is trying to say, guys, superheroes, they're kind of dumb. Like, at the end of the day, they're kind of silly and they're kind of dumb. And people who really like them grew up reading kind of dumb comic books, but we were all kids, and so like we don't care. They're just awesome, and it just leaned into that. And by the point, like at the very beginning, where you have NSYNC playing in the background while he's hitting people over the head with Wolverine's skeleton. I'm like, oh yeah, they know what they're doing here. They are just literally destroying the idea of a superhero universe that is serious.
Yeah, it was very farcical.
And in a way that you had like, all right, superhero movies are coming out. Now we're going to have the gritty, dark reboot of those superhero movies because we're all super serious now. This is now a conversation against that, where they say, yeah, we've had 20 years of that and we are tired of it and we don't want to be gritty or dark anymore. And Deadpool is now going to just slap you with a skeleton while making dick jokes.
I was about to say, and a few other things that
just the sheer number of jokes that they force in.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's impressive. Like, it's just impressive. Is it high art? No.
Yeah.
But like, it's saying in itself, I don't want to be high art and I don't need to be, and I'm incredibly clever, and I like it. I like that. Now it would get tiresome. That's the only movie that can do it. No other movie can do it, which is another reason that it's so much fun, I think.
Right. Okay. Why don't we...
He's like, here's why you're wrong.
No, I was trying to think of a way to parlay this through Star Wars. Eric, you've seen the best TV show ever made, Andor, yes?
I have.
Whew.
We could talk about
for a second.
Yeah, that was a close call. That was like, my finger was hovering over like disconnect call, you know what I'm saying? Like that was narrow. Phew. What was I going to say? Because we could talk about the opening scene of Andor and how because that proves that, I think, is a really good jumping off point to then talk about like what the difference between self-serious and like gritty, I guess. Mm-hmm. Because I think, let's do a time dot is and I'll explain myself. Because I
think Last Jedi might be an even better one because they wanted it to be really, really gritty, and then Poe starts throwing out Yo Mama jokes, and it.
Yeah, but
I know you like the movie. About
Andor. You just want the. I get it. It'll get more clicks if we talk about Last Jedi. Fine, we can talk about Last Jedi. I'm not saying you're wrong.
We can segue into Andor. We can get to something.
Juxtapose.
We'll get to something good.
Fine, we can start with The Last Jedi so you get your fucking thumbnail. Let's go.
I vividly remember when it was in our AP English class. That was like the class that was like so hard that's like, don't take it unless you either plan to write the paper properly or fail the class. And like one of the only times I ever spoke up in the class, and I gave this like 2-minute spiel in answer to his question, and it ended with something about like juxtaposing two different things. And he pauses for a minute, thinks, and then says, "Everyone ignore that. That's not what we want."
And it was at that moment that Darth became a needless contrarian. Okay. But anyway, look, fine. But which scene in The Last Jedi? Because I feel like as a film, there's a lot of issues with that across the board. But is there a particular scene in particular that you have as a jumping off point?
What I had picked up on was you just talking about how they were trying to set a gritty tone, but then like it wasn't I don't know if it's the dialogue or acting or whatever is not as serious as the tone that they were trying to set. This whole thing's going to be about the tone of Deadpool Wolverine and the tone of Last Jedi, and then / the tone of Andor.
Right? I also have a point, and in it I will make fun of Brandon Sanderson, so I think maybe he'll appreciate this. That's, yeah.
Look, I want to clarify something, because much ado has been made about me not being the biggest fan of Brandon Sanderson, and that's suddenly somehow become David hates Brandon Sanderson, which is not true. strictly. But like, I get it, and I have very little disciplinary interest in the types of books that he writes. I think one of the things in The Last Jedi that I think is the obvious point that you could look at from a tone perspective is the complete dissonance between the main plot and the stakes of the main plot and the casino planet, right? Like those two things are so like the casino planet feels like it's from the prequels, right? Like it has big prequel energy to me, in a way that the film doesn't want. Like it's farce, it's silly, right?
I agree completely. Okay. I agree completely. I've always felt like that didn't fit, that it didn't make sense, that it was shoehorned in, that, I don't know, somebody owed that writer a favor, and so they got their scene into the movie, especially because nothing comes out of it at the end of it. Like, it has no consequence. And it is kind of annoying because space casino with, like, that could be so much fun, right? Like, let's do James Bond in space. It should have been a hijink that actually went somewhere that actually made sense. But this wasn't the movie for it at all. That deserves its own plot completely, or at least for that to be the main B plot to the A plot throughout the entire movie.
Yes, or for the drama to like hit alongside the farce. Like that casino episode of Cowboy Bebop is the first thing that comes to mind, where that's still quite a short episode of anime, but like it hits all of the notes. It's got a lot of farce. It's exciting and the action works, but it's the drama is taken seriously and engaged with seriously by the characters in the story. It kind of feels like the whole time Finn and what's her name kind of know that what they're doing is a waste of time, because they kind of know that Finn should be going after his best friend who he's worried about. Like it has that element of a like video game side quest that, you know when you get up to like like there's a point in a video game where it's like, this is the point of no return. Make sure you go back and do all the quests that you haven't done yet. And so like, while the princess is, about to be killed by the dragon, you're out like picking potatoes in someone's yard. You know what I'm saying? And it like undercuts the tone of the urgency of the main thing.
But if you get 12 blue potatoes, you win the garden gnome. That's just, you got to.
And you're like, well, I need to win the garden gnome because I need to get the guy's quest so that I can go and do this thing so that I have 100% of all the side quests. Like that's just video games, right? Mm-hmm. It has that same tonal quality to me. I think, and this is where I'm interested in Darth's opinion, because I think that we come at this from very different angles. One of the things I like about certain types of stories is where the stories engage with the material of the story in like they take it seriously. And by that, I don't mean tonally seriously. I'm not saying that like the stories I enjoy are like grim, dark, right? Because I think that like a Zack Snyder joint can be grim and dark, but frequently doesn't actually engage with the material in the story in any kind of critical or serious way, right? Those Rebel Moon films in particular do not take themselves seriously enough for the tone that they're shooting for. I think for something like Andor, to use the opening scene as the example, where Andor goes into the bar. If you haven't seen Andor, stop watching this, go and watch all of Andor and come back. Do yourself a favor. And if you don't remember this scene, go rewatch Andor, do yourself a favor. But the scene is Andor walks into a bar, he's looking for his sister, and there are these kind of in uniform, like local cops, basically. They're sort of the equivalent of like city cops rather than like, FBI or stormtroopers or anything like that. They're local thugs, and they're getting annoyed at Andor because he's getting more attention from the women at the brothel. And because it's Diego Luna. Like everyone finds him attractive in that show, correctly so. And he goes
what a modern
out.
problem that just all of us have faced, right? Just
true. Like just everyone's like, well, he's hot. What do you want? Like it's him and Pedro Pascal. I feel like everyone's like, well, what do you want from me? You're a incredibly attractive man. But he leaves the bar and the cops pursue him, and he's just trying to leave. He's like, I don't want any trouble. Like I'm getting out of here. And they get into this scuffle, and Andor basically is like, he's got his hands up and he's like, take my money, like just it's in this pocket. And it's a complete accident that, in this scuffle, one of the cops hits his head against the wall and he dies. And in that moment, Andor has to make a choice, and he decides to, and he shoots the second cop who's a witness because he knows better. He knows the mechanism of of these local cops spins all the way into the mechanism of the Empire's control over this planet and the kind of local authority. And he knows if he leaves a witness that this is going to be a problem for him and there's no way out of this. But this moment, this single moment of taking this interaction very seriously by the characters that are in it is why the drama lands. Because the second that the cop who survives and isn't, doesn't hit his head, the second he realizes the other guy is dead, he starts panicking because he's like, this guy's going to fucking kill me. And Andor is like, you can see in his eyes, he's like, I don't want to shoot this guy, but I have to. And they both know that they're just in the situation that neither of them should be in through this just tiny accident and the pride of these two cops. And I think if you compare and contrast that with a lot of the tonal dissonance that you end up with in The Last Jedi, if the character, like if the casino thing had been a more weighty consequence for not necessarily the main stakes of the story, but to what Eric was saying, like a more weighty and meaningful B plot. Like, don't have it be fucking horses. Have it be like some subjugation that the Empire is that the first order, is that what they're called? Let's call them the New Order. Have the reason they're there be really, weighty and important and like so important and valorous or so morally imperative that they have to break from the main quest. They're like, we feel such a moral compulsion to intervene here on this problem. And that you could then have your drama, you could still have your farce, but you would have that kind of weightiness of the same kind of thing, which is like, hey, we shouldn't be in this position. We shouldn't be on this planet, but we're here and the situation is unfolded and we have to deal with it and we don't have a choice. And you just don't get that in the current material because of that tonal dissonance. And I think that for me, there are moments where in that film, the tonal dissonance does kind of work, but does that resonate with you, Darth, as like the kind of difference between the two? And I mean, that is like the foundation of why I think Andor is like fundamentally one of the best TV shows ever like written, is every single thing in that show is taken seriously by the people writing it. Even if it's not a serious moment, even if it's characters joking, it is engaged with seriously by the story.
Well, that is our in medias res introduction to this episode of That One Scene, where we take one scene of a Star Wars film or TV show and kind of break down what makes it tick. So last night, my brother and I just watched Wolverine Deadpool, and Eric was talking about kind of like the tone of the show and how like the writers and directors like really knew what they were going for and how that contrasts with some other things. So now we are talking about The Last Jedi and how the tone of some scenes just does not fit the gritty, dark realism that the film very much was trying to go for. So you've got the opening scene with Poe and Hux doing the Yo Mama stuff. Then you've got the casino scene, like David was just talking about, with the horse race and the rescue and all of this stuff. Shawnee really wants to be involved in this conversation.
Got something to say. Got opinions. Let me tell you. Like actually, like hardcore Yo Mama defender.
Last Jedi's controversial, and the child knows this is bad. I mean, he is just singing about it. Yeah.
That's like Darth is Darth is like, this is actually a anti Last Jedi household. You leave those opinions at the door. Thank you very much. So I think there's two things there that are interesting to me. The first is that
we're pausing for like 5 seconds.
Linear.
This is my mark.
We pause.
I'm going in.
Oh wait, Rye's here. Good pause.
I've made it.
Rye's here.
Oh, hello there.
Hello there.
Look out. Rye's here.
Look out. It's a threat. Look out. Rye's here.
What did I miss? I'm only 20 minutes late. What did I miss?
And he very much wants to talk about Andor.
Any excuse.
Oh man, I was thinking about some stuff earlier today, because on you have a peek behind the scenes, Darth had put up a suggested list of topics to go over this week. And one of them was tractor beams. And I was thinking of David's line, which he says all the time, is, "That's an Andor."
He literally said we can't talk about it because Rye's not here.
I was like, it's the most Rykoto topic of all time to talk about tractor beams in Star Wars.
Yeah.
17, 18. Nailed it.
Nailed it.
An ad just popped up with the girl going, "Wow!" Like exactly what I clapped. And I was like, ooh.
How did they know? The point, Rye, that I was making about Andor in comparison to, say, the Casino Planets was, talking about Andor's opening scene where that all unfolds with, if you recall that scene, he's in the bar and the two cops are like throwing around their weight and they follow him out. And then, they go to take his money. And one of them accidentally, in the scuffle, hits his head against the wall, and then Andor has to shoot the other witness. And I was saying the reason that scene works is the story and all the characters in it are taking everything that's happening seriously. Not necessarily that it's a serious story, but it's all engaged with as if it's really happening, and that it all has material consequence. Whereas I felt that, say, by comparison, some of the stuff that we've talked about with The Last Jedi, with the Casino Planet, or with the, as Darth said, the kind of your mama jokes at the start, is it feels like the characters in the story aren't taking the things happening in the story seriously, or perhaps rather that the story isn't taking the things happening in it seriously enough for them to feel like it makes sense. Whereas, the fact that the cop who doesn't hit his head, the second he realizes his body is dead, he starts to panic because he realizes that Andor's going to have no choice but to shoot him, because they all in the situation know how the Empire works and what the consequences here are going to be. And something that I found frustrating with Deadpool Wolverine is, and Eric was laying this out before, whilst it as a film understands exactly what it is, occasionally it rubbed me the wrong way, where I was it wants to land these emotional punches, which I think it does pretty well with its Logan. I think that, this version of Logan, who is just everyone hates him because of all the awful things he's done, that works for me to an extent, but I kind of wanted more from the film insofar as being able to demonstrate that it could have other characters outside of that one character that had engaged with the thing seriously. I don't know, that was my recollection from seeing it, but that was kind of the lay of the land of how we've been talking about this stuff so far.
So one thing I would disagree with in your thoughts on Andor is that, to me, very early in that opening scene, I feel like and which is what you should, this is something that you should do in your opening book, show, movie, whatever, is to establish what kind, set our expectations of what we're going to be doing and what kind of story this is. And he is in a brothel, which we've never seen before in Star Wars that I recall, or at least not so blatantly. You have Jabba's palace, and there's some questionable stuff going on there, but even that is a little bit of a joke if you think about it. But this is very early on. Is to me established that I was like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted out of Gilroy. This is going to be. This is serious. This is adult. This is immediately does not feel like, your daddy's Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Which I was there for that.
One thing that I immediately thought of with I keep going back to the beginning with Hux and Poe, and the reason that I think that specific scene does not work is because one of you just said that it's like the characters themselves not taking it seriously, and it's okay for Poe to be cracking jokes because that's in character for him, because when he comes up against Kylo Ren in the first one, he's cracking jokes, but Kylo doesn't flinch. And because Kylo is not in on the joke, everything is fine. But Hux, to an extent, is in on the joke because he's playing along with it. And because he's acting stupid, it makes him part of the joke, which is the opposite of what the scene needed. That because like that takes away the tension of having, you know, because like the tension was there because Kylo was ignoring the jokes. Because Hux was not ignoring the jokes, now he's part of it, and that just ruined the tone of the entire thing that they had set up with this huge death laser that could blow up all of their ships at once. And because he doesn't understand he's being made fun of, all of that buildup is just ruin.
It reminds me of... Go right.
I was gonna say I want to point to something else in the movie that I think is of the same ilk vein. I don't know, vibe is when they contact David's favorite name, Maz Kanata. That's a callback to our
Play
solo.
the clip.
And she remembers that Kazmadar?
Maz Kanata.
Maz Kanata. Oh, right. Damn.
You had all the right letters.
Phonetically, it sounded like a Star Wars name.
Yeah, when they call her up and she's like, she's in a gunfight. She's like, it's a labor dispute, you know, or everything. And then she like zooms away and like she's like, there's like she's hiding behind something. There's all kinds of like lasers going on, and she like zooms away in a jetpack, and that feels very much, or that part felt very much to me like our big complaint about Thor: Love and Thunder, which is like there's there's fighting and killing happening, and the characters within that scene are not taking that seriously. Do you remember when we talked? I think we talked about Love and Thunder, didn't we?
Briefly.
When she reunites with Thor and they're sort of like joking with each other, and people are getting killed all around them and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's very similar to Deadpool, where like the entire thing is supposed to be a joke, but it's like they take it too seriously in ways that Deadpool doesn't, and I don't really know how to describe that. Maybe it's the action choreography, like the way that Deadpool will kill someone makes it a joke versus the way that the Thor: Love and Thunder was handling stuff. The action was not part of the joke, and so they had the jokes that were like the words were supposed to be funny, but then the stuff that was happening was not funny to back up the tone.
That's
I would contrast that with God, what's the one that came before Ragnarok? Where
I was literally about to say Ragnarok gets it right, where it's big and campy. Yes.
So like the opening scene of Ragnarok, where he's like got him in the cage and everything, and like Thor's just messing with him, and it's totally awesome. Works there. I mean, not only does it totally work, but that also sets the expectation of what kind of movie we're in for. But somehow they get that wrong in Love and Thunder. I think possibly because they opened up with the backstory of God, I don't even remember who the bad guy is.
The God Killer.
Yeah, something like that. And that's very serious stuff, right? Like, doesn't his daughter die or something?
Yeah, it's pretty grim.
Yeah.
Right.
So that doesn't fit.
Movie opening for how campy the entire thing turned out to be. Like the dudes out there, like they run out of water and food in the desert. His daughter like dies in his arms. He finds a god somehow, begs him to bring the daughter back, and the god laughs in his face and says, you know, we're not here for you. You're here for me. You know, you serve me. I'm not here to help you. And then that's where the entire bad guy's motivation to kill the gods comes from. And then it goes from that into the most like utterly campy, ridiculous movie of all time, even though I was like entertained by it.
Well, you still also have Natalie Portman slowly wasting away from cancer.
Yes.
That we're supposed to laugh at the same time.
Oh my God, yes.
It's like
very difficult.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's funny cancer though.
Absolutely, humorous cancer, the most humorous.
Yes.
The point I was going to make earlier that I think ties this all together is, I think we've talked about this before, the difference between jokes and quips, where a quip is typically something funny that a character says for the audience, where a joke is usually something a character is saying for either themselves or to make someone else laugh. And the best example I can think of, obviously Marvel is like the big vehicle where quips became kind of mainstream, but it certainly found its roots in you know, Joss Whedon's kind of repertoire of earlier work. You know, the kind of Whedon the wedding speak kind of thing where characters are constantly quipping at each other. But the scene I would point to is in Casino Royale when, like if we're talking about that Hux pose scene, the scene in Casino Royale where it's Bond at the mercy of the villain, where he's been tied to the wicker chair, and the bad guy is whipping his nuts with a big rope, and Bond is in absolute agony, and he's doing little jokes, and the guy torturing him is like, "Stop doing that. Take this seriously. I'm trying to torture you." And he refuses. And like that to me is what you want to aim for tonally, where you're watching this going, like you're in your seat being like, oh my God, like, ew, like you're like physically trying to get out of your chair because you're watching this man get his nuts whipped, and he's doing these little jokes, and it adds to the weight of the scene because you feel how hard Bond is forcing this humor. And I feel like that's the right version of this scene, where you have to make it actually feel like it has weight. And that way, by the corollary, the jokes feel like they are trying to do something. The character's trying to do something with those jokes, right? Bond is using that to get under that villain's skin. And I think to Rye's point, with the Deadpool stuff, and then Ragnarok is its action scenes are big and bombastic and campy and also funny. Like they mix the humor in, but you know they can have the serious moments as well. The one that always comes to mind is like that big ending sequence on the bridge. And, you know, you think Thor is dead, and then he, you know, the music kicks in and he comes up and there's lightning everywhere and he lands and then it's like, oh, it's fucking go time, right? And then everyone gets their cool, awesome character beats where they get to do something really cool and actiony, and it all feels fun. And, you know, it feels earned and it matches the tone really well, where it feels serious, but it's not like Zack Snyder, like Doom, dark, serious combat where, you know, it's all about these big, like, single heroic moments of sacrifice. It's like, no, this is like fun because the rest of the film was fun. Whereas I think particularly in The Last Jedi, a lot of the action doesn't, like, the action tonally matches the main story that's happening, not the jokey bit with Hux and not the Casino Planet action. Like, it's like from different films almost.
With the horse race escape bit, I keep thinking that it like structurally makes sense if you're looking at Blake Snyder's outline of that he uses for writing his scripts, and like on like literally a certain page number is where the chase scene is supposed to happen, and like at that point in the film I'm like, this is the chase scene, this is like literally beat by beat where this is supposed to happen. And I feel like it's only there because it is quote unquote supposed to be there, because it doesn't actually fit anything in the story unless the point of it is that the entire thing didn't have a point, because it didn't.
And that's interesting.
That's kind of what I was saying about was it Poe's arc in that video that I did? Was that it has all the beats where they should be, but none of the stuff to back it up.
Do you think that like there is is there a difference for you guys between, because like, okay, one of the things that I've talked about a lot throughout the lifetime of just my time on the internet is the kind of controversy of some of the modern structurists who, like Sean Coyne is a really good example. He's like the story grid guy, where he kind of took storytelling, you know, he was Steve Pressfield's editor for many years, kind of take storytelling and kind of essentialize it into like a formula that can be repeated, where it's like, well, a story's working when, you know, this beat happens and then this beat happens and then there's the rise of, you know, very like a very kind of purely modernist structuralist approach to storytelling, in a way that doesn't leave a lot of room for experimentation or non kind of Western story structures and things like that. Do you guys feel that there's a difference between like, because well-structured films can have those beats and then do really inventive things with them? Is it the case that it doesn't work where they just feel like it's like obligatory, where it's like, well, you know, we're clocking in and we're doing the chase scene now, instead of finding like inventive and interesting ways to do that? Like, is that the difference, or is it truly like something more intangible about what Rye was talking about when we caught up last time, which was like, well, this happened and then this happened and then this, like, it all kind of feels like it compounds and follows logically. Like, I don't know, like, because in some stories I'm like, well, it's the compounding logically, and it's like in Darth, you mentioned this in the Batman, where you're sort of, you had a note or a classic Darth ding about the Batmobile chase sequence where you were like, it kind of felt vestigial, like it felt like it didn't need to happen. And it's because it's missing like a tiny amount of flavor to be like, and this is why it's a car chase right now. Now, I disagree with that because that film is flawless and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think that's like a similar kind of thing where to some people that might feel like an obligatory scene versus something that's earned and should be included. Like that's kind of a similar structural critique to me.
Yeah, for like anyone who hasn't seen it, I think that my argument had been like, you know where he's going. He's going back to his club. That is the only safe place that we've seen that he can go to. So the chase does not need to happen, and in my opinion was only in there because it is time for the chase scene, because structurally every movie is supposed to have a chase scene, whether that's horseback or whether it's parkour or cars. In Star Wars Attack of the Clones, it's the ships chasing each other through outer space and the asteroid belt, probably.
It's right at the beginning, actually, right? When they're chasing the assassin.
Could be. I was going to say maybe Obi-Wan going after Jango, possibly.
That is an awesome sequence. The sound design on those bombs going off.
Yeah.
So cool. Actually, but in space, the bombs wouldn't make any sound.
That sound design was unmatched until the moment in Last Jedi.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? It's like being in the theater during that moment.
Oh no, Last Jedi, the hyperspace.
Yeah, where they hit hyperspace. Yeah.
The much talked about.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the holdo
you hate it, but in the moment, God, that was awesome.
Yeah, there were like three different like full-grown men that you heard just go, oh.
Yeah. Also, and I know that I'm a needless contrarian, but this isn't one of those moments. I don't think it's a problem.
Are you talking about the holdo maneuver?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's cool. It's
so
cool. I don't think it's a problem. It's cool.
No, I want to talk about this thing that I have a lot of scripts that never made it past the production or the writing part. But like one of the things things that I was going to work on, or that I was going to do, was about like people complaining about like plot holes and stuff. Because there's that I forget what that guy's name. He made that video about like, shut up about plot holes or something. I forget. It's Willem something. I don't remember.
Patrick.
It's been a few years, but he made a video about shut up about plot holes, and I was like, no, I don't think that's right. Like plot holes matter, but there is to me a scale of like how significant something is, and the concept that I really like. This is not mine. I forget where I read this, but it was the fridge test. You heard of the fridge test? No. So the fridge test, David, is we'll apply this to the holdo maneuver. Like the holdo maneuver happens, you go like, wow, that's fucking cool. And then, the rest of the movie happens. You talk about the movie with your friends on the way out to the car, and then you get in the car and you're probably still talking about the movie. Maybe you go to dinner, and then you get home, maybe watch some TV, do some laundry, I don't know. And then later that night, you're like, I think I'll get a beer or whatever. And you open the fridge and go, why has nobody ever done that before? So if you make it to that point before it occurs to you, then it's fine.
Which I think, see, we have a different version of that in Australia. It's the pint test, where if after you've seen the film and you're at the pub and you go to get the second round of pints, if you're standing there watching the guy pour the beer and you go, wait a minute, why did that happen? That's the point where you go, this film didn't work or that scene didn't work.
So the other thing that I really like to apply that to is the disappearing knife in the throne room scene.
The throne room.
Yeah.
The what?
So do you know about the disappearing knife? You don't even know about the disappearing knife.
We did a whole that one scene on this scene, didn't we?
You did.
Yeah.
Well, there's a part where I think it's Rey is fighting the guy, and he's got her like dead to rights, but then like the knife just disappears.
Yes, we did talk about this, and I think my argument don't correct me if I made a different argument at the time, but I think my argument would have been, who the fuck cares? Because it doesn't actually matter that they, there was probably a reverse shot that they just didn't get coverage on. And Darth's argument at the time, I believe, was like, from a choreographing perspective, this is a very solved problem in film choreography and like in action choreography. And like, it's the kind of like, it's an inexcusable mistake for a film at this scale. But from my perspective, it's like, you're not going to notice that in the theater unless A, you're trained to do this stuff and you're like looking, you're like, you know what to see, or B, you do what we do and you analyze stuff, extensively was kind of my feeling.
Let's back way up so I can be one to correct you for a change.
Okay. Hell yeah.
Because the entire argument there, which I had done a couple videos with, like if you find some like behind the scenes footage of them doing the practice sessions and stuff for the choreography, basically it was that they rewrote the scene because she was originally stabbed with that second blade. And
that's right.
Yeah. So them removing the blade is actually about not wanting to have the lead female get hurt on screen, or completely rewriting how her character was going to progress after that point.
If you were like David said, unless you were looking for it, you probably wouldn't notice. Unless you're going through like Shadowversity and doing like your for real fight analysis, and like I have done a thing where the part at the beginning of the fight where like they both spin around back to back and like everybody comes at them and there's a thing. So I did not a video, but I did like a very short thing breaking down what happens in like that 10 seconds, and it's ridiculous what happens in that 10 seconds if you look at it like that. Now the way that I think that I don't care about the disappearing knife in this is that you aren't supposed to be looking at that. And if you go and watch the scene just like in real time, it is not so much for fight choreography, but the way that the shots are structured and the way that you are directed to look at specific things in each shot is magnificent. Like when you think about like the opening part, it is one shot from like from like a wide angle, not a wide angle. I don't know. You have the whole scene in one shot, and the camera I think maybe moves in a little bit, but a whole bunch of stuff happens. But what you are looking at is the entire room is red. All the guards are red. Everything is red outside of the middle of the screen where she is white and he is black, and that's what you're looking at. It's center screen. You have contrasting colors. That's what you're supposed to be looking at, and that's where your eyes are drawn. And if you watch the rest of it, especially the part with the knife, you're not supposed to be looking where the knife is. Like you have parts where like Kylo or some other people, like, they point the sword or whatever, and like your eyes naturally follow to the end of it, and then the shot pans to something else. And so if you watch it with that in mind, you'll see what I'm talking about, and it's awesome. But my ultimate example of or my ultimate reason behind saying that is that I watched this scene specifically looking for the disappearing knife, and I missed it.
Interesting.
Yes, okay. Because I was watching where I was supposed to be looking. I mean, I wasn't purposefully doing that, but I ended up doing that, and I missed it.
To me, it also sounds like, the stormtrooper hitting his head in New Hope. Things happen apart from where the director is trying to get us to direct our gaze, and sometimes the editor forgets or leaves it in and thinks nobody's going to see it, and it doesn't matter. And this is the exact same thing. It happens off to the side of the scene. People who look way too closely at things find it, and it turns into a conversation piece. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's not what we were supposed to be looking at.
Yeah, to anybody, to any Last Jedi haters that are going to at us about this, I will say, when I was talking about how ridiculous the opening part is, there's a part where I think when the three guys come in to attack Rey at the beginning, and she holds up her saber to block them, and then like does her little force kick. That's not, well, if you want to call it a force kick, she kicks them away. First of all, she kicks all three of them away. She only kicked the middle guy, but they all go spinning. And the second thing is that when she like raises her lightsaber, she doesn't block the guy in the foreground. His like he goes to swing at her and just stops. And then there's a different part where the guy just comes, he spins away just towards the camera for no reason. It's ridiculous, but you're not supposed to be looking at that, so you don't.
Yes. That stuff I have weirdly more of an issue with, like, but then the knife thing I could care less about. I don't know. I feel like anytime that you have an opportunity to, like, fight scenes in particular, that specific example that you were talking about there, where it's like characters doing stuff in fight scenes that don't actually make sense. I always think about the opening of Logan, where it doesn't play out like every other fight scene in like a film like this. He's surrounded by like 8 guys and they all attack him at once. No one's like standing in the background with a pipe being like, I'm waiting my turn. They just go for him because they're trying to kill him. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a, it seems to me to be a solved problem in filmmaking that, like, from a choreography perspective. Like, and I agree with Rye. That action sequence fucking rules in The Last Jedi. You're not looking at any of that. You're not supposed to be. I don't know. Unless,
at that point, you're completely out of the movie, which is why plot holes matter. Because in my idea about plot holes, you get a certain amount of hand waves from your audience, where they can go, all right, I'll let that pass. My suspension of disbelief is intact, but if you test that too much, eventually your audience is out of the movie. It's like the example that I like to use is you go to a restaurant and you're willing to let a couple things go, like the service is not so great, or the waiter took too long to take our order or to bring our drinks, or like the breadsticks weren't that warm or whatever. But then you get to a certain point where all of those little things, like something you hit either something really bad happens, like your food is shit, or you reach a breaking point. Like they didn't bring your margarita or whatever, and now you notice not only all the stuff that came before, but everything after, including all of the little things that you would not have if your food was fine.
Yeah. There's an example you talked about in one of your videos, Rye. I think that some people would call a plot hole, but I think is the right way to do this. And I talk about this a lot, which is that like stories are like made by people in time, right? They are phenomenological objects. There is no like perfectly wound mechanism of a story across like a number of projects. People make stuff over time and they decide, oh, actually in retrospect, I want something to be different. The example you talked about in one of your videos, I think it was the Rey one, is in Sicario 2, where you learn that the main character knows sign language. And it's technically like not rewrite, what's the word? A retcon to like have this be a character, because we don't know that. But like the way the story frames it is, well, actually, it's because of this, the loss of his daughter, and it's traumatic. That's the reason that it's never come up before. And so it feels perfectly natural for this character because they've done the effort when they are making that slight change to the continuity. They've done the effort to make it feel meaningful, right? Like one of the other ones in the. Oh, sorry, Ryan. Did you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've actually, so I still agree with everything that I said there, but I've actually sort of added to that in my, because as you know from the videos that I've made, like credibility is a big, or character credibility character credibility and motivation are my big things. That's my jam. That's my stuff. That's what I look at. And I've thought of, like, watching a lot of stuff, I've seen all kinds of different ways that you establish credibility for a character being able to do something. And if you need to establish immediate credibility for a character having to be able to do something, and we didn't know that they could do that before, first of all, there should not have been a situation prior where they could have done that and didn't, which there isn't. And the second thing is that if you want to establish immediate credibility, you attach it to something in their background. So in that case, what he does is he attaches it to his daughter, and there is this whole that's part of it, is that he's attaching it to his background that we know about. And then you have the whole emotional significance of that and how that wins the guy over, which is the rest of that. But if you ever need to do that for a character, it's like the other example I think of is in The Incredibles, Mrs. Incredible discovers that her husband has gone off to, or Mr. Incredible has gone off to some island or whatever. And so she's like, so she calls up her buddy and goes like, I'm going to need to borrow a jet. And it's like, okay, well, we didn't know she could fly, but she holds up a picture of her and the guy that she's allegedly talking to in like pilot gear. So immediately you're like, of course, she could fly. She's done it before. It's in her background. And that's why for Rey's part, when she goes and does her whole Falcon flipping thing, when she's escaping Jakku, she has the opportunity to do that, where she has multiple opportunities to establish her credibility. And it's like, have you ever flown this thing before? And she's like, no. I mean, right away she could have been like, yes, I have flown this before. And okay, that's great. That's pretty much all the credibility she needs. But she's like, no, I haven't done this. And then at every opportunity to establish her credibility, they double down that she doesn't have credibility to do it. It's like they get through everything. And he's like, how could you do that? And she's like, I don't know.
Right. I would, bullseyeing Womp-Rats with my T-18. All it takes is one line.
Well, no. So, but see, not just that, but I've gone back and watched that more. There's multiple lines in there of Luke building his credibility to do that. We used to bullseye Womp-Rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much more than 2 meters. Right away, he's establishing his credibility that he's flown stuff and he's shot at things while flying. The second thing is when they're flying and they're like, oh, there's the Death Star trench. What does he say when he sees the Death Star trench, Darth? Nerd check.
Oh, my word.
It's not much bigger than 2 meters. We used to bullseye Womp-Rats in our T-15s up back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
No, that's what he says at the mission start when they're flying and they're like, and they see the Death Star trench.
Doesn't he say like we'll be sitting ducks or something?
No. I'm saying that's when they're in the thing. When they're flying, when they're approaching the Death Star, and they're like, "There's the Death Star trench. We can see it." He looks down and he says something.
He's talking to Biggs, and he says, just like back home." I don't remember
Beggar's
the exact
Canyon,
words.
just like Beggar's Canyon.
There you go. Establishing credibility in his background.
There's also
that was freaky
heritage.
to watch.
Heritage in Star Wars is so important, and they say when he meets Obi-Wan, one of the first things Obi-Wan is saying to him is that your dad was a great pilot, and that immediately comes down because it's just as much of a heritage for Luke to be a Jedi, just like his father was, as to be a great pilot, just like his father was. And I think that's where they get confused because they didn't know who they wanted Rey to be, and so they just kind of start making her a mini Luke and trying to make her a part of this same Skywalker heritage when she has no, I mean, it's a problem if you want to make it, but she has no blood that connects her, and she has no training that connects her. And therefore they're using these beats that worked in A New Hope that don't work without an actual connection to the people that came before her.
Foreshadowing for tomorrow's episode.
It's also interesting to point out that the retcons, which started this little subtopic, that's one of the reasons one of our best friends despises Ahsoka is because she's never mentioned in episode 3. And in my opinion, Anakin would never, ever, ever mention her name again because of his character. Like, it is perfectly reasonable that she's never mentioned in episode 3, unless Obi-Wan did it as a means of trying to bring Anakin back or to trigger something in Anakin emotionally. But Anakin would not bring her up. That's like canonically sound, but it's also a retcon.
This is kind of what I was talking about, the Sicario example, where it's like, if you can make it part of the character, like flavor, and like make it part of the character motivation, that's where that's where the good stuff is, right? And that's kind of what Rye was talking about. I think there's a challenge that you end up with where, like, you can sometimes have this happen where audiences won't buy the reason you provide. And that can just be really that, like, your mileage is going to vary as an audience member. But, like, I always think to one of the examples in the Patrick Rothfuss's King Killer Chronicles. I think it's in the first book. The kind of main love interest, Dana, she lies to the protagonist about something and he doesn't know it's a lie. And so the rest of the series assumes this thing is true. And we know it's not true because we can figure it out for ourselves. And that works really well. Like, is having a character be deceitful or withholding or something like that. But there's a really fine line between that and then it feeling like the story is somehow like tricking you as an audience member. And I don't know where the line there is. And it seems to vary like story to story. And, you know, obviously audience member to audience member. But that's kind of where I find the character motivation overlaps with the plot in that regard, where if you have a character do something for plot reasons or say something for plot reasons that's like a retcon or that sets up stakes or something like that, it has to feel like it resonates. Otherwise, it just feels like the storyteller's like puppeting through this person. You know what I mean? They're sort of just talking on behalf of someone.
So what about when something feels like it's both, where it is like perfectly it's perfectly natural for the character to have this emotion or have this experience, but it also feels like it's just being put there to trick the audience. And my example is Karen in Daredevil season 2, I think, where she has just killed Wesley and she's got all of this remorse from it and she's terrified Kingpin's going to come after her. And from the audience's perspective, she wakes up in the morning and he's behind her, and then he comes up and throttles her and kills her, and then she wakes up in bed. And it's totally natural for her to have this terrifying dream of being murdered because that's what she's actually scared of and what she's actually feeling. But that whole thing was a fake out for the audience that I hate when they do that, because it's just there to mess with me. And it so many times it doesn't feel earned in the, like, for the character, even though in that instance, like, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, but it's still just a fake out for the audience. And
it's not okay, but that's not a fake out. That's trying to convey Karen's emotional interior state. Like, to me, that's not a fake out at all. The literal what's happening is technically a fake out, but that's not the purpose of that. The purpose of that isn't to be like, we gotcha. The purpose of that is to be like, hey, Karen is so fucked up by this that it's literally infesting her subconscious and she's dreaming about it constantly. Like, that's how fucked up she is right now. Like, that's the purpose of that.
And I have a hard time with it too, because innately I kind of think it's lazy. But if they were to show us that she was dreaming, then we would know it was a dream and that she was actually safe, and therefore we wouldn't feel the terror. She is actually feeling terror. And for us to feel the same terror that she is feeling, we can't know that it's a dream. So, like, I get
That's
it.
a good point.
I think it's overused and that there are probably other better ways to do it. But especially in a visual medium where you just want to, like, writers do this too. And I think the worst way to do this is, and by, I mean, like, in novels, the worst way to do this is, like, ending on a chapter with, and then he heard a sound from behind him. And then the next chapter starts and, oh, it was a cat. And
he's grinning because he's done that.
I learned, all right?
No, I meant David.
The thing about that is Dan Brown freaking did that, and it annoyed me. It was an Inferno, and I got so angry because I was really into it. I had never read him before, and it was these really short chapters that were very clippy, and he had a lot of action. And I'm like, okay, I see what this guy is doing. And then the veil came off at that point. I'm like, oh, you are just messing with us. If there's no action going on, you're going to create fake action to get me to turn the page so that I don't stop reading. And I felt cheated as a reader at that point.
Yes. But the difference, okay. Can I just say, I agree with you, Eric. I also think that dreams in general just overused, and I try to avoid them in all my stories. Go, Rye.
Side note on Dan Brown is the best Dan Brown book you will ever read is the first one.
The first one.
Is that Lost Symbol? No. Which one was first?
No. What I mean by that is
you mean the first Dan,
the first Dan Brown book that you read is like, after that, you're like, this is the same thing.
This is just what he does. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just his thing. Yeah, that's funny.
He's gonna be betrayed by the main character is gonna be betrayed by the authoritative figure that they trust the most. You know, it's they're all trash after you read the first one.
David, final note to wrap up this little subtopic. You did say, literally, it is a fake out for the audience when Karen imagines Kingpin in that scene. And I am most literal.
Awesome.
And I am the most literal person ever. So I was right.
You were like, well, you're like, I've got you on tape, bitch. Like,
Yeah.
All right. Before we wrap up, I want to bring this. Close the loop, bring it back to Star Wars. So one of the major complaints about Rise of Skywalker is how many fake outs there are in that movie. And there's a lot. And it's not like dream sequence or whatever, right? Or is there? There might be a dream sequence in there's. No, not that I can think of.
Well,
I haven't seen that. Like we said, I've only seen that movie once.
Well, there was the sort of one with Rey having the visions of her evil self. Whether or not you want to classify that, there was her thinking that she had killed Chewie, and then no, Chewie's alive. Them saying that 3PO couldn't read the stuff, or his memory would be wiped, and then somehow he's like everything's still okay.
There's flashback sequences from the Luke's point of view versus Ben's point of view.
I think that was mostly Last Jedi.
No, that was Last Jedi, but like that one, as we said before, is like that is to tie him to Dan Brown that's Rian Johnson's thing where he loves to do Rashomon. Only in that movie he doesn't do it very well. Versus, like we said, what's the murder one? Knives Out, where he does Rashomon so well in there. Done. Only he does it. Yeah, he does it perfectly.
Same with Brick as well.
Yeah, I've started saying this a lot in defense of both he and J.J. Abrams, that both of them have their niches that they are incredibly good at. They're just really, really, really narrow. Like, Abrams did really good work in like Super 8 or Cloverfield, where like there aren't supposed to be any answers about anything. And that's the point.
Yes.
And that's what he's good at. And like the Knives Out stuff, that is what Johnson is good at. He cannot work in the framework of someone else's thing. He needs to be in control of everything and not have to fit it to any existing stuff, and be able to do all the twists and everything that he wants without worrying what it's going to do to canon or the fan base or whatever. And it's awesome. Like it's amazing. I will defend Knives Out and that he did a really good job with it. And that just hurt me to say a little bit. So,
yeah, let's go.
That doesn't hurt me at all. I love that movie.
Yeah, so Luke was also great.
Yeah, they were
Third
both.
one's coming out, I think, this year.
I think that sounds right. He's just gonna make those till he gets bored of them, which I think is like awesome. And you gotta imagine it's gonna be.
Let him just keep making those and never make his trilogy.
I don't know.
Let him cook.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and I feel it's blasphemous to say it, but if he has creative control over all three films, that's completely different than what he was working with. Because I really feel like he's the kind of person that does not work well with others, if that makes any sense. Like from a creative standpoint, like he would need to be the person from beginning to end and be able to do whatever he wants. Like he could do all of these kinds of twists. Like if Rey was completely unrelated to the Skywalkers, Snoke was completely unrelated to Palpatine, and you've got this twist with the apprentice killing Snoke to save Rey, and then they have like this possible romantic thing. Like all of that could have been amazing, you know? It was just the fact that it's intertwined with this existing canon that everyone was like, everything doesn't fit. It doesn't feel right.
I mean, if they set him off, and it's a big galaxy with a very long history, and if they gave him somewhere else in the galaxy to some other time to play with, yeah, maybe. But there was the thing that you're talking about where you have like a consistent vision with something. There was a thing that I saw last night, which I wanted to talk to you guys about. And Darth, you might know this already, and David too, because you like Star Wars now. I was watching this. I was watching this
generalizations.
I was watching this interview with Lucas where he was talking about how he didn't know for the fight in the throne room with Vader, he didn't know what was going to turn Luke, or what would make Luke go over the edge. He didn't go in there knowing what was going to happen. He's like, we needed it to happen, and we wanted it to happen at this point, but we didn't know what it was. And it wasn't like that, and then until he thought about it, and he's like, well, we had the whole thing with like Leia being his sister. That would make him turn. And so that's what we did.
I mean, the other part of it we had mentioned with David last time, I think it was, that Lucas had originally been planning that Luke turns to the dark side, takes off Vader's helmet and says, now I am Vader. And so it may be that Lucas was like, he was talked into rewriting it so it would have a happier ending. And that could be why he didn't know what to do with Luke, because he hadn't fully planned out the whole thing. Which is funny because I was just pitching like one person should be in charge of the vision for the whole thing.
I was saying that to support that idea, is because the other thing that we talk about a lot when we're talking about the consistent vision of somebody is the dad and boy games. God of War. God of War. There you go.
Dad and boy games.
Yeah.
Wow.
Boy, that's what it is.
Boy. Jesus Christ. You had one guy at the top who had a very consistent vision on what he wanted, and people would come to him with like different ideas, and he would go, yes, no. And it made it what it was. Huge success.
My favorite thing about the story you told about Lucas not knowing what was going to turn Luke is they did all of Vader's stuff in post, because that James Earl Jones wasn't the guy in the suit. So,
yes,
legitimately, there could have been like 24 different takes that they had to sit in the editing room with different taunts that Vader would come up with to try to get Luke to turn. And then they had to just figure out which one they liked the most. And they probably have audio of James Earl Jones doing every single one of those to see which one was the most annoying. And the one
it's like, you fight like a girl.
Right? That's right. I stabbed you.
That's funny.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Say
something about his mom.
Yeah. I want to say one thing before we wrap up, which is it's extremely funny, by the way. On the thing that we were talking about with like the throne room scene and like not knowing where it's going, that is how you should be. That's how, like, from a writing perspective, you should be approaching every like climax point. Is you should be trying to write in such a way that you don't know how you're going to get your characters out of this, and like that's how you make the stakes feel real. Is when you're like, they are so sufficiently fucked that I actually don't know how they're going to get through it. And that gives you a real sense of weight versus where it's like, oh, well, there was always like a way out of this because I knew how they were going to escape. And so I wrote to that escape instead of I wrote to the conflict and then I figured out the conflict in a way that feels real. And I think that's usually the difference. And that's where you get those like films or those scenes or whatever, where you're like, why don't they just da-da-da-da-da? Like if there's a obvious why don't they just and why aren't they just, that's usually where the story has like a predetermined out for that conflict or that scenario, in my opinion.
It's kind of funny because I was going to argue that it should not have been that difficult of it shouldn't have been that far of a leap for Lucas to figure out what would have triggered Luke, because if you understand the characters, then you know what motivates them. And like, if it were Han, then he would have been like, I'm going to steal all your money, or at least like original Han. And for Luke, like certain things would trigger him and certain things wouldn't. And if Vader's able to read his mind at all, then it would be like, oh, your friends are super important to you. Oh, you have a sister. Family is super important to you. Like Lucas would have known all of this stuff. So if he's like, what would make Luke mad? It's that character development that would answer this story question,
Yeah, but Lucas
didn't really care about character.
He forgot that he made Leia Luke's sister because that happened at the last minute anyway.
Yeah, like he doesn't care about character really. Like he always talks about those Star Wars films as like silent films. Like these are just character archetypes in his mind. Is always my feeling about Lucas.
Yeah.
When it comes to Star Wars.
Which is really funny because so many fans are always like, you need, and I just said it a minute ago, that you need to have like one person with a consistent vision for the story in charge of it. And Lucas honestly just did not have that. He was just like making little art films as he went that sort of tied together. And then he'd just invent major characters along the way, and other people would have to figure out how to fill in those major characters and make them work in Clone Wars and all this other stuff.
It's Dave Filoni in the background trying to put it all together.
Yeah.
Yeah, like literally.
And I don't know that we've ever talked about it, but we need to delve into it at some point, that there's like a major conspiracy is not the right word, but apparently like episode 4 was only good because I think Lucas's wife like completely re-edited the entire movie.
Yes.
So I've heard that, and I've also heard that that's bullshit.
Yeah, I've never really.
I've heard that both ways.
My understanding isn't that she re-edited the whole film. It's that she was always going to edit the film, and that she cut out a lot. Like she did what an editor is supposed to do, and she made the film good. Like she did a good job. That's not really a conspiracy to me. Like,
well, no, that reinforces the point that I was trying to make, which was that as a storyteller, we give him way too much credit because it was like he has the support of these other people that made the end product what we rave about, and we attribute all of that to him, you know, as the grand master. But it wasn't really that. He may have had as much of a plan with his stuff as Disney has had with theirs, and yet, you know, we're calling them trash and saying he was the standard, which is what we should be doing. Everyone's just making it up as they go along.
Well, so
Yes.
the line that I always like to say about that, because you often hear people when the sequel apologists, they go, well, the originals didn't have a plan either. And what I like to always say about that is that when you talk about the original trilogy, that's an excuse, and when you talk about it in the sequel trilogy, that's an indictment. They are not the same thing.
One is a franchise. One is building everything from scratch.
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, exactly.
Because
boy,
like we said in our Vader
franchise.
discussion, Vader has to work alone in that movie because they didn't know they were going to make anything other than that movie. Whereas
Yes.
they start The Force Awakens, there was going to be 2 movies after that.
Right. Well, and this comes back to something we talk about a lot, which is like, even if your stories are sequential, they should be a story by themselves that is complete and works. And like, you should be able to pick up book 2 of a series and read that book and be like, I understood that book and it was a compelling story. Man, I wish I knew more about, there's one before it. And I think really serialized stories, which is I think what a lot of TV is now, doesn't really work like that. But you can still do that, and/or does that, where it's like, okay, the first 3 episodes are one contained story, then the next 3, then the next 2, then the last 2. Like, you can still do that, but I think increasingly with the Marvelification of entertainment, didn't like that coming out of my mouth. The kind of obliteration of storytelling into like content has meant that like and I said this before, the stories become a mechanism to make you watch other stories instead of the story that you're watching. Where it's
Universification.
It's like, well, you have to watch Thor 4 Thor's again because what happened to Star-Lord? Well, then you need to watch this film to figure out what happened to Thor. And like, you just end up with this like mess of shit that no one wants to actually be making or watching. And then they're like, and here's a new one. And everyone's like, it's not great. It's kind of a no-brainer to me that we're in the position we are now with a lot of this stuff. I don't know. Like, I think it just reinforces what we were talking about earlier, which is like, stories are like made by people in time. They make mistakes. They are as successful as they are because of a lot of entropy and luck and talent and other people. And there's no single person who's a complete genius. Every auteur that you know that makes great films has developed a team of experts that they work with because they are reliable people who are also experts in what they do. It is very rare to have like a true Renaissance man who is involved in every step of the process, and is an expert in every step of the process. And they do exist in different like art forms. That is certainly true. Obviously, like Kendrick Lamar is one of those people. We might think of someone like there are directors out there that we think of like that. I think Matt Reeves is one of them that a lot of us think of in that way. And there are auteurs, but it's not that the auteur is doing every step of the process. It's that they're involved and they understand it and they trust other consummate professionals to do that work and follow that unified vision, right? We talk a lot about general's intent, which is that thing in the army where it's like, if you have a really strong general's intent, it doesn't matter if the plan breaks apart because all the individual units will still work toward that intent. That is what a good auteur, like that is what good art, like on this scale happens from, not from like one person who's really good. It's one person who's really good surrounded by incredible talent and good cohesion and, you know, working, you know, a really good approach to the art that they want to make.
Well, as a follow-up to that, we've got our upcoming Daredevil Season 4 coverage. So before you see that, make sure to watch Seasons 1 through 3 and to watch every single episode of the review that David and Patrick did covering those first 3 seasons. And if you don't watch all of those things, then what we cover in Season 4 won't make any sense to you at all.
Yeah, and we'll know that you didn't and that you cheated and you're just watching Season 4. And we'll still let you watch, but we'll know. We'll know. And you'll know that we know. So...
Okay, final thoughts, Rye?
Well, that was a really great that 10 scenes.
That's my favorite series. I love that 10 scenes.
And a movie and a TV series and a video game that we covered.
I really wanted to talk more Deadpool Wolverine because we're still both pretty high on it right now, but
we can just do a separate thing on that.
We've already made you talk about it enough, and like I could see like your life force draining as you're thinking about it.
We should do a Patreon bonus, and I'll just get someone else who likes it, and I won't turn up for that recording.
You'll be in the background doing something else unrelated.
Yeah. I'll be playing PlayStation. You guys do it. All right, I gotta bounce.
Cursing, just did something else.
Oh yeah, I'll be some 12-year-olds beating me at FIFA. All right, fellas.
Kind of a free-form discussion.
I have none. I've emptied out my brain on this topic. I think I said my final thoughts before. Like, stories are made by people in time, and you should criticize stories and not people. That good?
Fair. I mean, frequently you're pretty wrong, but yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, okay. It's very well. It's actually the opposite of that. I'm always right, and it's very rare that I'm wrong. So it's actually you've got that confused in your head. I think is what happened.
My final thoughts are: setting expectations at the beginning of your story matters. Building your character's credibility and motivations matter. And there was a third thing because of the rule of 3 that matters, but I've forgotten it. So
Andor's really good. And you should watch it.
Yes, Andor's really good.
You may have been speaking more on this as I was downstairs taking care of my spawn, but I am very fascinated with humor within speculative fiction and how sometimes it works and how sometimes it doesn't. And I want to talk about that at another time to show why some things work, like a lot of the humor in New Hope that still holds up, and some of the humor that we were talking about that did not work in the sequel trilogies. And I have thoughts that will wait.
That's a good topic.
Yeah, I've actually got like a little script laid out already for that.
Perfect.
Yeah, cool.
We might need more than an hour for that. But yeah, I would be down for that discussion.
Okay. Why humor fails, Star Wars edition.
Yes.
Cool beans. Anything new to pitch besides the upcoming Daredevil thing that I'm not behind on my viewings at all? I'm gonna make it.
Anything new to pitch? Yeah. We've got a new project coming out that will probably come out in a couple weeks. I don't know timeline wise. It should be out by the time you hear this. Where me, Patrick, and Danielle are playing through Pentiment, which is one of the best written games of all time, and just kind of talking through our experience of doing that. And yeah, that's probably the next big thing we're coming up on my side of things. I don't know when it will be out, but we're also looking to publish a special edition hardcover of Pale Runner, which is my book of video game essays, with some just absolutely gorgeous art. We're still in the layout process, but that will be coming out soon, which I'm really excited about. So that's on the horizon as well. You can go to underink.press and sign up to our mailing list to get notified about when that's out.
Cool beans. Anything upcoming for you? Like fourth kid?
No, not to my knowledge. I'll talk about
Fourth kid.
number 3.
Yeah, we're on 3
All right,
already.
this one's 3.
Jeez.
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
bless.
Yeah, somebody finally explained to me how it works, and now I shut that whole thing down.
Figured it out.
Yeah. Previous work, ongoing work, I have a podcast with my wife called Diamonds in the Rough Draft, where we find scripts of old stories that we wrote when we were kids, and then we read them and laugh about them, and then try to rewrite them into real stories now, and we drink beer while we do it, and it's great fun.
It's very wholesome.
Wow.
Well, there was one about like clubbing baby seals or something. I don't even remember.
We actually try
the
to make-
vibe.
We try
The
to
vibe
make-
is wholesome.
We try to make the titles as scandalous as we can, because I realize the sexier the title, the more clicks it gets, which is
Yeah.
basic knowledge I know for the internet, but I wasn't expecting that.
Love it.
What an
Cool.
ending.
What an ending. God. Clubbing baby seals to death. You love to see it.
Thanks for joining, everyone. And goodbye there. See you next time. May the
Cheers.
force be with
Enjoy
you.
the second half of your workday.
Rye, say the thing.
And may the force be with you always.
Yeah. Gets me every time.
Chills. Yeah, a little bit.